So, what might be the problem with learning John chapter 3? What might be a struggle with that story?
You mean without knowing the Old Testament reference?
Well, I mean, just learning the John chapter 3 story.
There's a lot of monologue in it.
Yeah, there's a lot of words in red, right? And they're amazing words in red. You know, that is not to belittle the words in red, not to belittle what Christ says. However, if you know, Andrea said, well, let's just do the first 16 verses of John chapter 3. And I went, no, you know, I can't do that. And then what happens is you do an injustice because you end up skipping so much stuff. And since we have been focused on I'm just trying to explain to you guys thought process. All right. Since we've been focused in the first part about Numbers chapter 21, we have to get to the second, we have to get to that part of John chapter 3. So if you do the whole chapter, it's going to be miserable to remember, and people you're sharing with are not going to remember the story. Right? Oh, I just froze up for the first time. There we go. You're back. Sorry about that. I've gone all day long and not frozen up a single time, and now here we are. I'm going to switch my internet over here real quick. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just going to switch to a different provider. There we go. This should be a stronger signal. So I want to be sure that we get, I don't want to skim over anything, and I want to have a chance to dig into that section that has to do with, just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, right? So what we decided on, and not sure how this is going to work out yet, but John chapter 3, verses 9 through 16. The introduction to that is Jesus is just, Nicodemus. I heard a great sermon on this called Nick at Night, right, which is a play on the TV network where Nicodemus came to Jesus at night, which kind of tells us where Nicodemus is at, spiritually at that point, right? And he's like, hey, Jesus, I can just picture him looking over his shoulder. Jesus, how do I go to heaven? And Jesus goes, you must be born again. And one of my favorite, like Nicodemus going, man, Mama's not be too happy about that. That doesn't sound very good, right? And so Jesus talks to him about what it's going to take for a spiritual birth. And that leads us to our story. Now, with the understanding, we will already have done the Numbers 21 story, so I won't include that in an introduction. Okay. And Nicodemus said, how can these things be? And Jesus goes, are you a teacher of Israel and you still don't understand these things? And Jesus said, truly, I tell you, we speak what we know and testify of what we have seen, but you don't accept our testimony. So if we've told you about earthly things, how, and you don't accept it, how can we tell you about heavenly things? No one has ascended into heaven but the one who descended to the earth from heaven, the Son of Man. Just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so too must the Son of Man be lifted up, so that whoever believes in him may have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And so that will be, we'll do a quick lead through here. So Nicodemus starts off with a question. Remember what his question was? How
can these things be?
Yeah, how can these things be? And Jesus responds with a question that says, are you a teacher of Israel and you
Still don't understand.
you don't know these things? Jesus said, truly, I tell you, we speak what
we know.
What we know,
what we know, and we testify to
what we have seen.
To what we have seen, but you don't accept our testimony. So the testimony is kind of built on the testify what we have seen. If we've told you about what?
Earthly things.
Yeah, earthly things, and you don't believe, how are you going to believe if we tell you
heavenly
things?
Yeah, about heavenly things. No one has
descend from heaven.
Nobody has ascended into heaven
except the one who descended.
Yeah, exactly what you said, Vivian, except the one who descended from heaven, and then he calls himself something.
The Son of Man.
Yeah, the Son of Man. Just as Moses
lifted up the serpent in the wilderness,
so too must the
Son of Man be lifted.
Be lifted up so that everyone who does what?
Believes in him.
Believes in him may have
eternal life.
Eternal life. And then that text that, even the most lost of all lost people know. For God
so loves the world that he sent
his only begotten Son, or some versions say his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. So what do you think it might have been like to be Nicodemus and you go to Jesus, and I mean, obviously you have some degree of respect for him, right? Because you really want to, have you guys seen The Chosen?
Mm-hmm.
I think they play a little fast and loose with some things, but I've really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm constantly checking scripture because I want to make sure I don't take something as scripture that's just the imagination of the director. But I really liked the way they've handled the whole Nicodemus thing, even though I think they've probably embellished a little bit, right? But what do you think it might have been like to be Nicodemus, and you come to Jesus for a deeply theological answer? What I got to do to go to heaven? And he starts talking about being born again. I mean, what might it be like to be Nicodemus and have that answer come back at you?
I think, Bush, the first thing is that the question itself, what you need to do to go to heaven, is a very profound question in itself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so it will. I mean, that Jesus responded in this way, actually befits the question. It fits the question, right?
Yeah.
So it isn't something. So I think in Nicodemus himself, there was this complexity already. There could be a complexity. There could be a confusion within him. And he could have heard conflicting views, like we often do, right? Like we all often do. We all hear different views, and so now is hearing from somebody like Jesus himself, the rabbi, right? Because maybe he has heard around about Jesus giving very profound answers to many things before that, right? So he came to Jesus. So definitely, I believe that Jesus therefore address his need, actually address
so Jesus
what
looked
he was
beyond the
actually
question.
looking for, because there was yes.
Yeah, so Jesus looked beyond the question to Nicodemus's actual need. I like that.
Right.
Yeah, I like that. Well, guys, what do you think? Do you think in Nicodemus's mind that he probably had a series of already preconceived answers he was kind of expecting?
Especially if he's like a teacher, or like a professor, one of those smart ones, the erudites. That he's already knows what the answer is, and he's trying to find out that it's confirmed. He's trying to make sure Jesus is thinking the same thing that Nicodemus is thinking, not the other way around. He's not trying to align his thoughts with those of God. He's making sure that God's thoughts are his.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, that's not an uncommon thing for people to try to confirm what they believe, and hopefully not end up having to change your mind, because that's really hard to do.
Yeah, especially if it means you were wrong.
Yeah.
Like I actually had that happen once.
Must have been terrible. What's that feel like?
It was. It was really a struggle to adjust to. But
before this,
Vivian.
Before this story, we never heard about Nicodemus, right?
Yeah, it's like
okay.
he's not around.
Okay, so he could be someone like Andrew say, like, one of those know-it-all philosopher. I mean, theologian, just pull out his credentials. Like, I already know this, or he could be really a humble guy. I don't know.
Yeah, and hearing that question, probably need to include in the introduction that he is a Pharisee, that he's one of the leaders, we find out. So I need to make sure that I do include that. So he asks this question, and Jesus gives him an answer that's pretty colorful, right? I mean, it's pretty earthy. Jesus's answer. I mean, it's kind of, you must be born again. And then Nicodemus keeps digging, like, really? I mean, one of the things I respect about him is he doesn't shy away from admitting he doesn't get it. Right? Which is not which is not something we even see in the disciples, right? That they typically, they're never going to admit they're wrong, right? Or that they don't understand something. And Nicodemus does. And so to start with his question the story we're doing today, how can these things be? Nicodemus said. And Jesus said, are you a teacher of Israel and you don't know these things? Truly, I tell you, we speak what we know and we testify of what we've seen, but you don't accept our testimony. If I've told you about earthly things and you don't believe, how can I tell you about heavenly things? No one is ascended into heaven but the one who descended from heaven, the Son of Man. So, and I'm just thinking right now in the introduction too, I need to include Son of Man. That's the title Jesus refers to himself as more than any other title in the New Testament or in the Gospels. Jesus calls himself the Son of Man. So, I mean, what do we learn about Nicodemus? Here Jesus has shared all this stuff with him, and then his response is, how can that be?
Can you explain when he asks, how can this be? What is this?
Well, Jesus, he said, how do I go to heaven? You got to be born again.
But that's afterward, right?
No, he did that. He said that before this. Yeah, he's already said that. John, the very beginning of John 3, you must be born again. And he talks about the spirit and the flesh and those things.
Okay.
And Jesus, Jesus talking to him, and Nicodemus is like, how can these things be? Right? I mean, how else could Nicodemus have responded?
He could have asked Jesus to explain what he means. He could have said, I don't understand. I need some help, especially if we want to help the other Pharisees find out how to get to heaven too. I mean, we all want to get there.
Yeah.
Have we all been deceived for so long?
Yeah. Vivian, what were you going to throw in there?
I was thinking when he asked, what must one do? And Jesus said, you must be born again. That's not something you can do. You are like the receiver of what's doing.
Oh.
Something is doing to you. Like, and so he could have said, like, Jesus, you're not answering my question. What can I do?
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Let me look at that real quick. That's really good, Vivian.
Yeah, that is good. That's really good.
And I think to Vivian's point is that actually, Butch, before saying that, actually Jesus has already given that answer, right? Because Jesus, after he asked the questions, Jesus' response was that you have to be born again. Then when we go into verse 5, then Jesus says in verse 8, the wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it's going. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit. So what triggers me here is that what triggers my question here, which is that here could be a understanding of what the Spirit means to Nicodemus.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It triggers what he says. Okay, so it adds on to the complexity of what he actually already understood, that now you are telling me born of the Spirit. Now, what is this? Could be in his mind. What then do we actually speak about when we speak about the Spirit?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because I don't think I can get trying to remember within the Jewish tradition of how the rabbis have taught. They may not have they spoke a lot about God, and you can see that in Numbers, in Leviticus, and all that stuff. But you never see them talking in terms of the Spirit, right? And I do not know. Maybe this is something I must jot down and find out, that perhaps it is this first time in the scriptures, that the Spirit is actually mentioned in such a prominent manner.
Yeah, and it does seem, kind of what Jeremy, you and Vivian both are saying is there's a contrast here, right? Of something that's being done for us as opposed to something we can do ourselves, right? And the fact it's not, okay, do these three things, do number 1, number 2, and number 3, and you're set, you're good to go, right? Which is kind of what people have wanted down through the ages, right? Give me those steps. And Jesus' response is pretty vague, right? So what do we learn about Nicodemus's understanding of what Jesus said from this question that he opens up this story with? How can these things be? I mean, what does that tell us about, so here Jesus has been teaching about the Spirit, being born again, it just, and Nicodemus's response, how really? How can that be? I mean, how else could he have responded there?
He could have just be like, you're not making any sense, Jesus.
Yeah, he could.
Yeah. And to Vivian's point, it doesn't make any sense because he doesn't understand. Perhaps he doesn't understand. I'm speculating here that he does not understand the Spirit.
Yeah. Well, and again, Jesus's answer in this story, right? So Jesus says, "Are you a teacher?" The New King James Version says the teacher. And I struggle with that a little bit because it's hard to glean that. This is one of those times that I actually went back to the Greek and looked, and I just don't see that. And most translations say a teacher, but does it seem like Jesus understands that Nicodemus is not just I mean, you just say like, wow, you're one of thousands of teachers in Israel. Or does it seem like Jesus is saying, Nicodemus, what do you see there? Like, is Jesus saying he's something pretty special as far as a teacher?
Well, if you look at the NIV version, the NIV, which I always use, the NIV version simply says, "You are Israel's teacher." That means he's probably pretty up the hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
He's probably pretty up the hierarchy, and a known personality. He is not somebody who is one of the preachers in the synagogue kind of thing, but he is definitely an authority.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Somebody other people respect and look up to.
Right.
So what do we learn about Jesus from his answer there? So you're a teacher of Israel and you don't know these things? I mean, does that seem a little condescending from Jesus? I mean, if Nicodemus is a teacher of it, like he's, like you say, Jeremy, he's up there. I mean, what do we learn about the way Jesus responds to him here? I mean, he's, up to this point, he's been a little vague.
Right.
Is his reply to Nicodemus in this part of the story, is it vague at all?
Actually, when we look at responses generally, and Butch, correct me if I'm wrong, I know how we respond has a cultural, could have a cultural perspective on it, right?
Yes.
So from different cultural view, you could say like you say, Jesus could sound a bit condescending kind of thing, but maybe in the way that they spoke at that time, that kind of answer or that kind of response was quite acceptable, because they could be like the Greeks sitting around, having a debate kind of thing. And so in a debate, you could actually discount the way people respond, because in that sense, in my view, that could be it. So I won't straight away jump to say that it does to us from our day and age, how we would say kind of thing, because we would naturally say, let me explain to you, right? Let me explain this method to you. But Jesus did not say, let me explain this method to you, but he responded in this way because maybe it was permitted in that kind of discourse. However, the second part, there's another view of it could be that Jesus then also responded in this way because he wanted to prepare him for actually say, what on earth are you telling me that then it was a more profound answer that followed that response.
Yeah. Now, when I read this, when I was in high school, I was raised in a Jewish home. And my stepfather was a wholesale diamond dealer. So we had all kind of Hasidic Jews come and stay at our apartment in Louisville from New York City. So Vivian, do you ever go to that part of town or through that part of town?
Yeah, and I remember you mentioned there, and I witnessed like with very few Jewish people I encountered, they are very direct, and at first it's kind of like, wow, you're so rude, and then you get used to it.
Yeah, for somebody from the South, because in our culture, in the Southern culture, it's just, man, we don't just talk to somebody face to face about, we're going to go through a lot of things to get to that point. And I can remember the straightforwardness of the Jewish culture just blew my doors off. I was just, all the time. I thought there was going to be a fist fight at any moment. So, what do we learn about Jesus here? Because if this guy is a teacher or the teacher or a higher up, does it seem like Jesus is, Jeremy, you're in a very honor shame culture of people respecting authorities in a big way. I've been in a lot of Asian cultures, not where you're at, but and one of the things that that I really value is the honor that they give elders and those who have earned certain degrees of respect, either through education or age. Even if Jesus is not being rude here, or not just being, kind of in the face, do we see him doing anything like that in his response? Are you the teacher of Israel and you still don't understand these things?
It's just like what you have just said, Butch, that when you meet the Hasidic Jews, they come up right front of it, kind of you. So that is where we are concerned, how they actually would respond to one another, and nobody would feel sensitive to it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So nobody would just feel sensitive to it, kind of thing. But in our cultures, yes, we said, hey, come on, man, I'm just trying to ask you something, man. You don't kind of slap me in the face when I ask you a question, kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? And Jesus could have done that because Jesus could be seen as a peer to him, as somebody equal to him, right?
Yeah.
That in the crowd when they say, but like what you said, in our culture, particularly the Eastern cultures give a lot of reverence to authority, kind of thing, right? But then in the case of Jesus could be a peer to him. People also call Jesus rabbi, so he's a teacher himself, right?
Yeah.
Jesus is a teacher himself. He has his own following, he has his own crowd, he has his own stature. Probably he definitely have a stature. So when the fact that Nicodemus actually approached Jesus itself, it could be testimony and evidence of Jesus himself as being a person of stature. So Jesus could therefore reply to him in this way.
Yeah, and I do find it interesting. I mean, Jesus is like, the words that Jesus uses here, because do you see Nicodemus as being older? If he is a teacher, if he is the teacher, if he's an elevated teacher, do you see him being older or younger than Jesus?
Probably, definitely older.
Yeah,
because we are talking about Jesus being in ministry at the age of 30, kind of thing, right? So definitely he's older, but definitely Jesus, in terms of at that age having his following, could have a certain stature himself, right?
Well, and one of the things that we see throughout the Gospels is this innate authority that Jesus had when he spoke. Just repeatedly you see, and the crowds were just in awe of him because he spoke with authority and not like the scribes and the Pharisees. So even here, if there was an age difference, and and one of the things you make me think, Jeremy, with your response is, yeah, Jesus wasn't a rabbi at a big synagogue or in the temple, but he had shaken up the nation. People were like, dude, who is this guy? He was people were talking about it, right? He had people having religious conversations that might not have had a religious conversation for a while, right? And so Nicodemus would have, the fact that Nicodemus came to him at all with these particular questions says something. But again, Jesus's response, you don't know these things, like I expect you to know these things. And then he says, I tell you, we speak what we know and testify to what we've seen. Right? And so if you can't believe the earthly things, how can I tell you heavenly things? So, how straightforward is that? Is there any way that message, and again, I think we have to be careful. I don't think Jesus is being rude, but do you see him holding back at all?
No. I feel like he's being a little secure, but not really holding back.
Okay.
He's not like, this is too sensitive. I'm just going to sugarcoat it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Not what.
Well, I wonder, since he knows, obviously he knows who Nicodemus is, right? Based on his response here. Do you think his answer could be because he knows how immersed Nicodemus is in that belief system of the Pharisees?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he might be possibly, based on his response here, do you think it's possible he's trying to break through that crust of belief that he knows Nicodemus has? What do you think?
In a way, I feel like Jesus is almost saying, not only that he, like you said, like you are a teacher of Israel, you still yet like don't understand. He kind of expect that you should, and not only Nicodemus didn't understand, but also he understand very little.
Yeah.
I'm still a little confused when Jesus said like earthly things, like we see and we see, so we can testify. What are the things that he sees, and what is he testifying?
Maybe Vivian, that's the thing here, because maybe Jesus is referring to the miracles that he did, and the miracles that he did was actually by that time. Remember, his first miracle was turning water to wine, right?
Yeah.
And so you follow the sequence of a miracle. That means at least there were several miracles before that. So Jesus has actually already, as a rabbi or a person of stature, here already, kind of thing. So to him to say that, I think is quite clear. But here also, I believe that in that particular statement, I must go back, like you say, Butch, to read the Greek kind, back the stuff kind of thing. When you think about how Jesus is responding here, it's also to say that it's also an indication to say that people have not come to a certain level, general level of understanding of God himself and God's plan for them, right? God and God's plan for them. So you think about it, the Jewish people, God brought them out, from God had brought them out from Egypt and all that stuff, and brought them, and to the point now of Jesus, all of this point, the people, if you want to use the analogy, the people are still in the wilderness, so to say. So the level of learning and understanding of God had not actually progressed. So therefore, Jesus, when Jesus said this, we are not progressed in actually your understanding of God.
Yeah.
And so in our own understanding, in our own thing itself, it's just like Jesus questioning us. You've seen all these things, guys, and yet you don't get me, kind of thing. So Jesus is actually waking us up himself, as he questioned Nicodemus. The same question bounces back to us.
Yeah, and I that makes me, that triggers something in me, a thought. In this story, do you see that Jesus might consider Nicodemus's religious training to be holding him back from gaining real spiritual truth? Like, are you a teacher of Israel?
Yeah,
you don't get
absolutely. I think that's a great point, Butch. I think that's a great point, right? So all of us, it tells all of us who go to seminary, theological schools, and all that thing, we got to wake ourselves up by saying that there will be things that we don't know. Right?
Well, that leads me to, in the story, we see that based on Jesus's questions, it seems like he understands that
Right.
Nicodemus's religious system is hindering his ability to understand deep spiritual truth.
Right.
I mean, today, does that still happen, that people's upbringing or training or
Yes.
education
Yes.
might keep them from the best stuff?
Yes, yes. I'm a trained practitioner in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. And in NLP, one of the things that we learn is what we call limiting beliefs, right? So one of the things we learn is limiting beliefs. So our understanding and impression of things is definitely based on what we know.
Yeah.
And so there is always a saying that in NLP, that the map is not the territory. So when we look at this small, whatever we look at, we may miss the whole big picture kind of thing.
Yeah.
So NLP teaches me, for example, to be always to remember this, that when we are in any conversation, it warrants me to hear out so that I can broaden my understanding of the territory and not just the map.
Yeah.
So Nicodemus had that, like all of us human beings, right?
Right.
We have that shortcoming. We have so when we meet Jesus, kind of thing, when we encounter the scripture, we are trying to actually broaden our knowledge of God, and so we need to that thing. But there's a great question. There's a great point you brought up. Just to highlight, I've never thought about it. Having read that passage several times, I've never thought about that how profound Jesus actually turned around to him.
Yeah, and Jeremy, you make me think of something, because I'm seminary trained and had great seminary experience.
Right.
I hear a lot of guys complain about their seminary experience. That was not my case. I was very blessed, very practical, yet theologically rich training. But it's amazed me how, as I've started doing Bible stories as Bible stories, the things that I'm seeing in passages that I missed with all my Greek and all my commentaries and all those things. I've been quite surprised in these last 11 years now of doing Bible stories at the absolute depth that is discovered in simplicity.
Yes.
If that makes
that makes total sense, right?
That there were times that I missed the forest for the trees, right? As we would say here, that I was so focused on this little that I missed the beauty of the simple presentation of just profound truth in a very simple way.
Wow, you have given me an idea with this passage, that next time when I teach, because at seminary I told you that I teach. I set up the business school within the seminary.
Yeah.
The whole idea is to walk people through the script, walk people using the scriptures to do business through the scriptures. This is a great question in what we call limiting beliefs. This is a great passage in limiting beliefs. So I shall tell people, say, that whatever we learn, and all of us, I think, can identify with what you say, Butch, because what you say is that, despite the years of studies that we put into, you discover that the Bible get richer and richer and richer and richer in your life as you read it through your life. But the great thing about it is also that as we progress in life and learn more things, the Bible goes in tandem with us.
Yes, it does. We can never plumb its depths. As we say. Well, I wonder, Vivian, Sarah, for you guys especially, is there anything you see in this story that might help you in the future? So, Anything there that just kind of jumps out at you? And it's okay if there's not. I mean, that's, I'm not going to think less of you.
It's definitely worth pondering more.
Yeah, as I look at this, I'm just, I examine my response to people, because I do respond to people based on my culture. And I wonder if there's sometimes that I'm so worried about being nice that I don't.
You worry about being nice?
Yeah. Okay. I don't spend a lot of time worried about that. All right. So it's not like I stay up at night worried about it, but there are times when, I really think about, if I say that to so-and-so, they might, it might hurt their feelings or whatever. And I might not be as challenging, let's say, as I could be. And again, not rude, not mean. I don't think that's the point of this story, is we need to go out and be mean to everybody to get their attention. But I do think, and especially I'm thinking as a child of the South, and, Sarah raised in Philly, the city of brotherly love, which I think is one of the biggest jokes, in our particular country. I mean, what other countries, whatever other city in the United States has pelted Santa Claus with snowballs? But that I need to examine things, the way I respond to situations, kind of what you were talking about, Jeremy. Not so much from my culture, but from the biblical response. And if that pushes up against my cultural understanding, then I need to be willing to set my cultural understanding aside, and break out of my cultural comfort zone to do what is biblically right and accurate. So we will look at the rest of this story hopefully next week. That's my plan. I don't know what our schedule is yet, but hopefully we'll go to the Ark on Thursday. But even if not, I'll just try to take my phone and we'll.
How many times you been to the Ark this year? Do you get like a punch card or something?
I didn't know I was going to be going that much, because if I had known at the very first time I went, I would have bought the 1 year membership thing, right? So now it's like, every time I go and I shell out the money, I'm going, I'm going to save so much cash.
You should show them the record. Like, you already spent all these 4 times. Just give me the membership.
So, yeah. And I was going to go back and do a video for the Chinese church in China. We were going to do a tour of the Ark, but that kind of got shot in the foot. So now I'm going to go, as soon as I get back from North Carolina, I'm going to go to the site where the Second Great Awakening broke out, which is about 30 minutes from here, Cane Ridge, Kentucky, which is out in the middle of nowhere. Literally out in the middle of nowhere. So thank you, guys. This story is in John chapter 3, verses 9 through 16. And, if you see anything in here that jumps out at you that we didn't notice, I'm going to be posting this. I'll post this video online later tonight on Jeremy. I have a YouTube page, Butch Vernon STS, and I have about 180 stories on there. Well, videos on there, not 180 stories. Usually I spend 3 days per story. So we will we'll be posting that on there when we're done. So let me hit the